Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of What's the Point? I'm Bill Ellis, your host, and I've got a guest today who has a fascinating life story of his own, but also is in a position where he has helped countless people improve their life and find their purpose and bring good to the world. In total transparency, he's also one of my very dearest friends in the world, Mr. Fleet Rand. Hello, Fleet.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me, man.
It's absolutely a pleasure, and I look forward to this on many, many different levels. So Fleet is a licensed clinical social worker, and he's a counselor in private practice. He's been doing that for decades, for 25 plus years, and he's literally helped thousands of people directly and through the ripple effect of his knowledge. So with that, let me just ask you to expand on that, Fleet, and share a little bit more about what you do.
So, what I do, Bill, is to professionally, I just walk with people through their life. I am lucky enough, or blessed enough, if you want to look at it that way, to be able to journey with people in their most vulnerable times. I get calls all the time from marriages or from individual people whose lives somehow or the other are not going the way that they would like for them to. And I see that space that they allow me into to be sacred territory. And I just journey with them and hopefully do some pretty deep heart work with them so that they can tap into their own vulnerability and be the best that they can be for themselves.
Yeah, and that says a whole lot, because one thing I want to make sure that is clear both to me and to the listeners, when you say help them tap into their innermost feelings, I think is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really key to understand that your approach is helping people find their own solution.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, Bill, and so I really do believe that 100% of every single client that walks in my office has access to their own solution. It's just a matter of being able to open up a safe place so that they can quite literally do their own internal work and again, tap into their own vulnerabilities, which I believe takes them to understanding their own meaning and purpose and then doing something with it.
So it strikes me, Fleet, that willingness is a very key component of anyone that you work with that's going to achieve any real results.
I think, yes. I think it's key. The willingness happens actually before I meet them at all. When they pick up the phone to call me, no matter what the reason may be, there's a degree of willingness. That's a very courageous thing for a person to do, by the way, to pick up the phone and call and say, I'm hurting, and talking to somebody they've never met before in their whole life. So that's willingness right there.
Yeah, it is. I'm curious, and this is as much a business question as anything else. Your source of clients, how much of that is referral?
Now in my career, I would say that it's probably 80% referral.
Okay. And I'm just curious, does that referral come from current or past clients, or does it come from other professional sources?
I am extraordinarily lucky because I have a lot of different areas that I'm involved in my life. I have a very big life, and so a lot of my clients are referred to me from various different churches around town, and I also have a large corporate clientele that I work with because of my past corporate career. And those people now know what I'm doing, and it's just sort of evolved to where I have a number of areas that I tap into.
Yeah, and I think that says a lot that people from your corporate experience still think of you, because that's been quite a number of years since you were literally in the corporate world. But
Yes.
let's take that path just a little bit here, Fleet. What I want people to understand is your journey. How did you end up here? And we'll kind of go in reverse chronological order from one of the most respected family counselors, not just in St. Louis, but throughout our state and frankly our country in many areas. Prior to that, you were in the corporate world, and prior to that, you were a young Fleet. So, so share with us, however you choose, your journey from there to here.
I will, Bill. I think I love the name of this podcast. What's the point? And I've
Thank you.
been sitting and thinking and meditating and praying about. So, what is the point? And I think in my story and in this podcast, what's the point is never give up hope. No matter what, never give up hope. And that idea, I think, permeates its way throughout my whole story. And I can go with that anywhere. Actually, I grew up here in St. Louis, and I was a very lucky person to have some incredibly loving parents and a family system that was supportive and allowed me opportunity in areas that a lot of people don't have. And it was all of those opportunities, I think, that helped me get to where I am today, from schooling and other experiences, not only growing up and going to various different schools, which in and of itself is a story. Let me put it this way. I'm just celebrating 50 years in 3 different high schools. So that gives you some idea of...
That's a lot of class reunions to get to.
It is, yes. My story, I think, is one of seeking. I've always been a seeker to somehow or the other, excuse me, to find my meaning and purpose. And if I may, for just a second, I believe that that what I'm doing right now is the manifestation of my meaning and purpose that in my heart I believe I knew I had even in my teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
And I, by my own design, I actually didn't really follow that intuition for many years. I was involved in the commercial industrial real estate brokerage business for well over 20 years. And although I was very successful at that, I just hated corporate America. It wasn't me. And I would put on a suit and go into a boardroom, and I could do what I needed to do to get the job done and get the deal closed. But it wasn't filling my soul. That's the only way I noticed it.
Right.
And I think that through that seeking of trying to figure out who am I at the core, I needed to go down that path to find out the impetus for what catapulted me into making some very significant life choices and enter into this career. So I think that, as I said, I needed to go down the path of corporate America to try to have all of those experiences that brought me to this place. A large part of my story, quite frankly, is that I became very heavily involved with drugs and alcohol real early on in my career path. And that was not the driving force. I think what was the driving force for me was that I really never felt comfortable in my own skin. And even in corporate America, drugs and alcohol was an accepted piece of everything that that we did, from
Yep.
from sales calls to boardroom to everything. And it was not a problem initially, but it became a problem, and so much so that I ended up going into drug and alcohol treatment for the purposes of coming off of all the drugs and alcohol that I'd been using. And it was as a result of all that, quite frankly, that I had to do that really hard inner work to be able to tap into the energy that, as I said, I knew was there even as a teenager. But when I got sober, my life opened up in ways that I never even before imagined it could.
Yeah, so that's a whole lot, and let me take just a minute to unpack a few things and maybe expand on them. I think one of the most key things I've heard you say, and you referenced it twice, is having the sense internally, even as a teen, of what your purpose was, but that it wasn't really clear to you. And that's a point I talk about in every single show, and that is that our purpose oftentimes is hidden or disguised, or it's something that we have to move towards, and certain experiences help us understand that purpose. But finding our purpose is key to really igniting passion and then giving us the path that we want in life. And our purpose continues to grow and evolve. And I think you're a great example of that. And the other thing is, so you talked about what I'll call a kind of a sequence of events or a process through your commercial work and getting sober and ultimately becoming a counselor. When did you really start to understand yourself, to really get to know who you are and to have that purpose come forward? Is it part of this overall journey, or was there a singular pivotal moment?
So I think that it's a great question, Bill. I love it. I think really I had to go down the path first of knowing who I wasn't before I could begin to even take a look for who I needed to become.
Such a good point.
And so, and this is just my story. So I was given messages very early on in my upbringing, my family of origin imprint, the people that I was hanging around with, that whole corporate scene. And this is just the way it manifested itself for me. I thought making money was the key. I thought that was the thing that was going to make me happy or give me a sense of meaning and purpose. And man, did I just sought that. And again, I was very lucky. I was successful in that. But it's just really interesting because the more I made and the harder I had to work, the more empty I became inside. And I needed to feel that emptiness to be able to know, wow, this is just not me. This is, and to somehow or the other begin to have, I won't call it courage, because in that moment it wasn't courage, it was desperation.
Right.
I had lost all hope, and I didn't think that the world that I was hoping was going to unfold in front of me was going to unfold in the way that I thought it might. And I went into a really dark, black space where I lost all hope. And I think, Bill, that is that defining moment for me. And I'm just saying for me. Other people don't have to go down that path, but I had to. And it was in that moment of complete desperation of what is this world, what does my life look like? I had to bottom out and I had to surrender totally. It's a very good friend of mine calls it a program of a million surrenders. And it was, but I didn't know what surrender meant. I knew what a bottom was, and I had to reach that bottom and surrender in that. And and ask for help. I had to ask for help. And when I asked for help with that degree of willingness, Bill, that you talked about, that's when these messages began to open up for me. And I was then able to access and begin to honor and allow that internal sense, that intuition that I'd had for so many years, to give it life and meaning and energy. And I'm still learning to do that, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and it is a continuation, and I thank you for acknowledging that. But what I was going to say is what a brilliant pivot from your personal story to how you bring that hope and that clarification to the world as best you can. You know, regular listeners know that I love the book, The Go-Giver, and its philosophy. And when you talked about you thought money was the answer, there's a great line in the book when the hero is talking to his mentor, and the mentor says, "Does it make money is not a bad question. It's just a bad first question." And the first question is, does it provide value?
Yeah.
And that's what you realized, that you had this perception and this gift to bring clarification to people that were also hurting. So, you know, when you say it's just your story, I agree, because all of our stories are unique. But I also believe that humankind all gets to points of feeling some level of desperation and some level of needing clarity, and that's probably why they get to the point of having the willingness to phone you. So with that set up, what do you think the most common misperceptions most humans have about life or about themselves?
I don't know that I can answer that in terms of most people.
Okay.
I think that, I don't know, Bill. I think the misconception somehow or the other is that they doubt themselves, that they end up feeling, for whatever the reasons may be, that energy inside of them, their drive, their meaning, their purpose, that somehow or the other they doubt that. Maybe they've gotten messages that have not allowed them to grow in those areas. And so they push that down or don't give it a voice. And I think a lot of the times people's lives are stifled because they don't listen to that intuition and follow that, I call it a spiritual calling, quite frankly, inside of them. And I believe we all have that. It's just a matter of accessing it and allowing it to speak to us in a way that we give it energy and meaning and purpose and do something with it. So,
yeah. So that was a very big question, and I'd like to apologize, but I'm not going to, because I think you gave a very sound answer to it. And I would like to ask this: how much of what you see in your experience, as opposed to the collective world as a whole, in your experience as your counselor, how big an issue do you see it that people are either unwilling to or unaware of or afraid to ask others for help? And as you say, just to clarify that while I give you a second to think that through, basically to surrender to the fact that I can't do this alone.
I'm not actually sure that I understand. So you're asking what, Bill?
Well, I'm asking how common it is for people to not have the self-realization that it's okay to,
Right.
and frankly, more often than not, necessary to seek help, and that it's okay.
Mm-hmm. So I think so much of that that perspective comes from, I'm going to say, trauma, one way or the other, that somehow or the other through their years, they've gotten the message that they need to do it. They are the ones that need to make all this happen. You know, whether it's a married couple or a male or a female, a husband, a wife, a career-oriented person, whatever it may be. I think it's that ego, if I could say it that way, that stops them from reaching out and really saying, wow, I think I've reached a place where whether I want to or not, I need to ask for help.
Yeah, so you had mentioned earlier that you reached the point of true desperation, and that's your story and not necessary for everyone. But again, I think that there is a level of desperation that we all seek at some point. And then the question becomes, in my experience, what are we willing to do about it, or what path do we have in front of us that we're aware of? So when you are working with people, is there, and this is maybe a touchy subject, but do you see a difference in approach or openness or willingness or impact on a gender basis?
So I know your question, but I need to walk around it for just a second. I have a core belief. As a human being, I have a core belief. As a spiritual being, I have a core belief. As a man in recovery, I have a core belief. That core belief is that everybody is seeking secure attachment. Everyone is seeking relationship that matters. And I know it sounds like 60-ish, and I don't apologize for that because I believe that that's what I'm going to say matters. I think that if you love another unconditionally, without judgment, and that you just allow them to enter into their own process, then those fears drift away because they're beginning to understand the significance of a securely attached, just a good relationship. And so when I have one in my office, male or female, or younger or older or culturally different or whatever it may be, the answer to me is pretty simple. I just love them unconditionally. And I don't know whether that works. I don't know that you're going to find that in any clinical book or anything of that nature, but that's what I do. Man, have I seen some stories of success and resiliency through my years.
Well, based on that comment, that leads into perfectly what I was going to say, and that is whether it's in any textbook or any course somewhere, with your experience of 25 plus years of doing this and your highly successful record of seeing those stories of success, I would say there's a lot of validity to that, so that when you do write your book, maybe that's the title, because I love the name Secure Attachment.
Yeah.
And what that means. So let me shift just slightly here, Fleet, and that is to touch on a few things, the same topic that you've mentioned more than once, and that is your strong spiritual sense, and let's be direct and say your faith.
Yeah.
Share that, how that has helped your life, how that guides your life, and how that in turn helps you to love unconditionally.
So I just have to start with just one anecdotal story. I was at a boarding school at a very young age, and I was scared to death. I didn't really have any friends. I didn't feel like I fit in. It was at a point, Bill, I was probably 10, 11 years old, something like that. At this particular school that I went to, we went to this church. I couldn't tell you the church. I don't know the denomination. I don't know anything about that. What I know is that this young, scared person went to this place, and people were talking about peace and spirituality, and I'd never heard any of that, and somehow or the other that experience, and I think this is a really important thing to say, touched me, and it stayed with me. There was something that very young boy going to a church, going to a place of worship, where I felt something that never left me. And I think to some extent or the other, I sought out a superficial way of trying to recreate that feeling. And, Bill, it's interesting, just for me personally, I've always been a helper. I've always been a helper. I didn't know that until I got into the helping profession, but I've always been a helper. And when I look back, I picked my career as a social worker very intentionally because because I've always wanted to help. Whether it was, I won't go on, but, with some of the social justice energies that I've been involved in through many, many, many years, private, not-for-profit organizations and others, and I could make a whole list of all of them. That's not relevant. What's relevant is that I was drawn into that because it gave me meaning and purpose. My corporate world didn't, but helping did. And so I think it's just important that that's just a manifestation of what went on for me years and years ago. And finally, it got to be something that I pursued.
Another great example of your experience, Fleet, and that is we rarely know how much impact the seeds that we plant are going to have. And that's important in self-reflection. We often don't realize the seeds that have been planted inside of us. And that's an example of what you just talked about. Mm-hmm. Having that touch of feeling, basically what you talked about was you felt a secure attachment
yes.
in that church, which you have no clue where, who, why, but the feeling and the sense of that was there. And what I know about you is that when that seed really sprouted within you and you actively sought spirituality, you've since found a church home that provides you with that same feeling. And anyone in St. Louis, it's the Crossing Church, and they have something that fits right in. They have one of many slogans, but one thing that they say often is "Hope wins." And that speaks directly to what you talked about earlier. You want to share any of your experience through or about the Crossing?
I'd love to. I didn't. I wasn't a churchgoer. I wasn't an organized religion guy at all. To me, that was. Well, I won't go down what I thought what that was at that time, but I was not an organized religion guy, and when I got sober, which happened on September 11th of 1993, I ran into some phenomenally powerful people that planted seeds, like you were talking about, and one of them. Was a gentleman whose name is Tom, and excuse me, Tom challenged me to pursue my spirituality, to enlarge that light, that flame that was inside of me, and called spirituality, and I did that, and at one point Tom also challenged me. To define that God that I was that I was seeking, and I didn't know this was going to happen. Funny how that happens. I didn't know this was going to happen, but I was asked by a friend of mine to go to church with him on a Sunday. And, and I walked through the door of this place, and there was a guy, excuse me, there. His name was Bill also. And Bill stuck out his hand and he said, welcome, we're glad you're here. And that was at the crossing. And I just had a sense that Bill meant that. I didn't quite know what that meant, but I walked in and I went through my very first service there. And you remember that feeling that I got as a young child in that place of worship. It was actually in Aiken, South Carolina. But I felt that same warmth, that same energy, that spirit when I went through my very first service at the crossing. And I felt like I was home. And I sought that with a passion and asked millions of questions. Tom had asked me to pursue that and to expand and to know my God. And so I did that. And I got to know my God very, very well. And so the crossing and the people that I've met there and the people that I've walked with and who have walked with me have helped show me that unconditional love and acceptance is the way we should be with everybody. And with that, hope wins.
That is so powerful, Fleet. And again, a few things. First of all, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being comfortable enough in yourself to let that emotion come out. Because I think if nothing else, that's a lesson that myself and anyone listening to this, I hope becomes aware of, that it is okay to show emotion, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of culture. We have emotions for a reason, and for you to show that gives that sanction. But the other thing is, it really shows the impact of getting that feeling again. You know, when it started to kind of reconnect with that very first seed that we talked about from Aiken, South Carolina. And one of the things that we share in our approach to recovery, which it sounds as though it relates directly to you and your path down your faith walk, is the concept of attraction rather than promotion. I know, at least in my case, that people strongly promoting their specific answer to anything, faith or otherwise, doesn't really work well with me. And it sounds like you are just absolutely attracted to that bill and that church.
Yeah. Well, those people,
Yeah.
and I could go down a list. I could give you their names. They didn't push anything on me. They didn't require me to do anything. They invited me in, and they modeled for me, as do other people. I mean, it's not just confined to the people that are at the crossing. I'm so lucky to have men and women and young people, holy mackerel, young people who model resiliency and courage and strength. And that's why it meant something to me. They lived it out. They didn't just talk it. Words can be cheap. It's about the action and the way in which they and we allow unconditional love to happen between people.
Again, so powerful. And I hope this doesn't come across as a promotion piece for the Crossing Church, but I do want to point this out. I know enough about that church, although I'm not a regular attendee, that their basic premise is they welcome all who are seeking. And that's what you said early on, is that you are and were a seeker. And the phrase "seek and ye shall find" comes to mind. So let me bring that back out of just the faith arena and bring it back into your life. And let me ask you this. What type of insights or suggestions or thoughts might you convey to the listeners uh, to help them, A, start seeking, and B, kind of have an understanding of how to seek? Ultimately, a lot of people phone you and they're seeking that solution, but can you give us any broader suggestion or thoughts on seeking?
I think, Bill, once again, I love that question. Excuse me. I think we are all seeking. I think each and every one of us, in our own way, are seeking. We're seeking something. And I guess maybe the best suggestion that I could give to anybody is it's almost sounds elusive, but pay attention to the energy that's inside of you. There's a word, intuition, which to me is spirituality. And so I don't care whether it's an 11-year-old or a young person that's in high school that's struggling with relationships, or young adults or married couples, doesn't matter. I believe that inside each and every one of us is this, like I said earlier, a desire to seek profound relationship with one another, but it starts internally. Having enough clarity inside of who you are and what your heart is saying to you. Everybody's got that. It's a matter of tapping into it, allowing it to speak to you, sometimes through meditation, sometimes through prayer, sometimes through the guidance of other people that mentor or walk with you or whatever it may be. The light is there. It's a matter of you allowing it to shine.
So I think that's fabulous. And what I'm going to do is bring back something you mentioned earlier and tie it into what you just said. And that is, from my experience, and it's why it resonated with me when you said this, oftentimes for us to find out what truly satisfies us and to find our purpose, we have to define what doesn't do that.
Yeah.
What have we done that is unfulfilling? You and I have both had that experience in the corporate world,
Yeah.
and some people are the exact opposite. Some people are just absolutely fulfilled by that, which is perfectly fine, and that's the point. We're all individuals. But to find out what doesn't work for us, be it in a career, be it in a relationship, be it in day-to-day life, I think being able to identify that helps us find what our purpose is through a process of elimination. And the other thing is, I've heard this so much recently, and it resonates with me, is there's absolutely no failure if we've learned from whatever the situation is.
Yes.
So I love your commitment to encouraging people for self-seeking and self-realization, and add to that your comment of eliminate what doesn't work helps us find out what does work.
So Bill,
So I'm going to ask you somewhat of an. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to jump on something very quickly, which you said just so perfectly, I think. This idea that no matter where your path may take you, there is meaning and purpose to that if you're willing to see it. And whether that's doing something that you're not fulfilled with, that is a good thing. You can look at that and go, okay, that means I can alter my path and do something differently. I don't think anybody is, unless you choose to do it, remains stuck. If you take a look at that and go, this is not me, I need to do something different.
Yeah, and remaining stuck is something that I've done in my life, to be totally transparent. And it's the old adage of doing the same thing, expecting different results. It isn't going to work. And some of us, like me, it took a lot longer to realize that than perhaps others. So I was going to say, I'm going to ask you somewhat of again, a pretty broad question, I think. And you touched on it earlier when you talked about your definition of what's the point, and you talked about hope. Is there any method or process or clue or anything at all that you have found through your experience, both personal and professional, that allows people to really tap into hope, to see hope? And particularly, there's some pretty dark times, it seems, right now on a lot of different fronts, and hope can be diminished. Do you have any wisdom? Do you have that magic pill, Fleet?
You know what, Bill? I wish I did. And if I
Yeah.
did, boy, yes, if I did, I would. So, you and I spend some really good quality time together, and we talk about some of those things that are going on outside in this world. And I don't have any answers for that. I think I have, at least in my own story, some clarity that that the only one that can do anything is me as it relates to what happens all around us. And so I try, to the best of my ability, help people see hope in vulnerability. And I know the two don't sound like they should exist in the same sentence, but they do if we're willing to step into our vulnerabilities, into our fears, into our whatever is holding us back, and getting to know that vulnerability in the very best way possible. It's through that clarity that we can get understanding of, oh, okay, I can do something differently, and that perspective of negativity changes to positivity. So I'm responsible for that inside of me. I don't know that that's going to help the world, but it works for me.
Well, I think that, and we've had this discussion, I believe that if we are able to try to tap into the best version of ourself, we've done what we can to improve the world.
Yeah.
And the best version of ourselves may be some form of activism if it's properly channeled, and it may just be being the best father, wife, husband, brother, sister, daughter, worker, counselor, podcast host that we can be, and see if we can touch lives. Another really important question: savory or sweet?
Savory or sweet? Meaning pick one?
Yeah, if you had to choose savory or sweet.
Well, they're both experiences, so I think I would pick savory.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to say that surprises me a little bit because the question I'd actually written down was, what's your favorite dessert? And I thought you were going to say sweet and it would lead right in. So, see, always learning.
Chocolate chess pie.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And that might be the point right there.
Yeah.
Chocolate chess pie. Okay.
You can save it
That's
for a
something.
long time.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to have to explore because I'm definitely on the sweet side of things. So if there were limited items on the buffet, we would get along just fine because you could have the savory all day and I would take the sweet. This is a point in every episode where I typically ask my guests from their perspective, what's the point? And you so eloquently already answered that earlier with hope. But so I just want to give you the opportunity, Fleet, to expand on that if you want, or add any of your final thoughts on what we've talked about today.
Hope is such a powerful word. I've been told that that in certain venues the word hope doesn't really apply, and my reflection back on that is that try it anyway, because hope creates opportunity. And so I think that in this moment in our world, people are so polarized. But if we have a heart and a soul of hope, and maybe it's about getting to the hope of maybe I'm wrong. I'll get to know someone and begin to understand their experience, which and maybe this isn't what you're looking for or I'm looking for, but getting to know other people creates an intimacy and an understanding and awareness. And it's in that, I think, that we can be redefined by hope all the time. And so for me, the idea of hope is that understanding it and pursuing it creates opportunity to be in relationship with one another that matters. I think that's where
And that, my friend, sums up what you were saying so perfectly. Being aware of it and pursuing it
Yes.
opens up opportunity.
Yes.
So hope by itself, it at least starts to give us some potential positive thinking. Acting on that gives us some potential positive action. And when you talked about the chance that could allow us to connect where we haven't, that to me ties back again to one of the things you mentioned that I love so much, and that is secure attachment.
Yes.
I think that if we collectively could become more secure in our attachment to the world, and to the people in our world, we would perhaps all be in a better space than we are when we are focusing exclusively on the differences and trying to build those as strong as we can. To look for the similarities, I think, to me, is what might help fuel hope.
Yeah.
I hope you have a fabulous day. I appreciate so much, Fleet, you coming and sharing your experience, both personal and professional. I want to thank you for all the help you've given to so many people, because I've witnessed it directly and indirectly. And I just, again, feel very strongly and intimately about our secure attachment. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Bill. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.